guys will all be graphic novel publishers while we present the story Emberfell. When a group of 4 amateur documentarians stumble across a war-torn fantasy world, they must decide between staying and bring peace to the inhabitants or returning home to worldly fame. This is a story about ambition, sacrifice, and learning to stand up for what's right.
Miles, our main protagonist, is the videographer of the group. Miles is kind, soft-spoken, and empathetic. In times of crisis, he tends to freeze up and let his friends do the decision-making. He hates that he can't stand up for himself and often feels like a bystander in his own life. Ryota, or Rio, is our secondary main protagonist and the director of the group. Ryota has a reputation of being a confident, cool-headed, and dependable leader. The pressure of living up to this reputation often leads him to assume sole responsibility of his friends' well-being, sometimes even if they ask him to back off. Kayla, our first side protagonist, is the researcher of the group. Her greatest strength is her unfaltering drive, and the others rely on her to make sure they never fall behind. Alana, our second side protagonist, is the sound engineer of the group. She's clever, bubbly, and impulsive. She often drags the group into situations before they're ready, but her spot-on intuition can usually keep them out of trouble.
Our story begins in the early 2000s when our 4 main characters get an assignment from their employers, Miserly Media, to investigate the unsolved murder of a reclusive author, Ivan Vanderbilt, with the prime suspect being Bruce Herman. When they arrive on Ivan Vanderbilt's island, they find unpublished manuscripts of a world named Emberfell. When exploring the island further, they actually find a well and a cave, which is a portal to Emberfell. Once arriving, they quickly meet a man named Oren, who's your friendly, old, down-to-earth inventor. He explains that ever since Ivan Vanderbilt's death, the 2 largest cities in Emberfell have been warring. He pleads with our group to head back immediately to not cause the conflict to get any worse.
Discouraged, our group heads back towards the portal, and Rio actually still insists on publishing the documentary, to which Miles tries to object. But while they're arguing, a horseback messenger rushes past them and drops a document, which is a blueprint for weapons with Oren's name on it. Confused because they know him as this harmless gadget inventor, they follow the horseback messenger to a castle, which they enter and they find Oren inside. Kayla and Alana ask him random questions about Emberfell to distract him while Rio and Miles search around the rooms in the castle, and they find more blueprints for more weapons. And they find out that not only does he manufacture weapons and make money off the war going on in Emberfell, he actually sabotages any efforts to stop the war, including they find a plot for him to bomb a peace treaty happening in town later that day. Oren, of course, gets suspicious about where Rio and Miles are, and so he leaves Alana and Kayla and catches them in the act. Fortunately, all 4 of our filmmakers are able to escape Oren and his guards, and they hide in the forest. Rio takes charge and says, "Guys, we got to get out of here safely while we still can." But Miles musters up the courage to say, "No, we have a duty to expose Oren to the people of Emberfell." So they create a film about all the evidence they gathered, and they present it before the peace talks in town that day to expose Oren and his evil plot to the world of Emberfell. Oren, who's nearby, sets off the explosions prematurely and uses them as a cover to escape. He goes onto a nearby boat, and while Kayla and Alana stay to help the people, Miles and Rio chase after him on the boat, and they have an epic fight before the boat takes a wrong turn and falls off a massive waterfall. Badly injured and coughing up water, Miles and Rio struggle to catch up to Oren as he begins to make his escape. And that's where our story ends. Or that's the end of Act 2.
All right. And thank you again for going first today. I'll just guide you through this process. So are you going to jump to the Q&A or are you going to share your reflections next?
You want to do reflections?
Sure.
Yeah. So I was pretty excited to work on this project, and there were a lot of ideas we had. None of us actually chose our world building idea for this project. We chose something completely new. Initially, we thought about doing something like a commentary on society, but we just decided it'd be better to have just sort of a fun, imaginative story with, kind of like fantasy elements, but not too stock and cliche. Was it you who had the idea of them stumbling upon fantasy world? I can't remember.
I think it was you, actually.
Oh, and then
It's a group effort.
yeah. You guys have to say.
I had a ton of fun making the characters. That was the part where I got to actually, zone in. And I made like 12 pages. I don't know. I wrote a lot. Most of that wasn't used, but I had fun doing it. And I made the visuals and stuff. I really loved the character stuff. That's always my favorite.
I think we played to each other's strengths really well. I think we recognize that Sonic is very good at the character development, the world building, and we had to figure out a way to shove that into the plot. I think it turned out pretty well. I think my favorite part is we went on a long journey to get where we are. We're going to do so many other things besides this, and it's my favorite part is we had so many other ideas. I think we were able to work through that, refine to get to where we are. And it's completely different than what we originally thought we were going to do at the beginning.
Yeah, our story changed a whole lot. This is SaanikaA's light box, and SaanikaA drew that image of the well. This is Eli and I's light box, kind of based off of our group as they enter the world of Everfell. And I'm just like, oh, check this out. I'm surrounded by all these fantasy elements. So, yeah. All right.
I really love how we have multiple rounds of applause to punctuate each section because I think it's well deserved. So now it's the Q&A section.
Yes.
What events leads to Miles' development from being timid and not wanting to take charge to being oh no, we gotta stay and expose for him?
He starts to he starts to see the similarities between our villain and Ryota's motivations, because they're both they both are sort of motivated by climbing the ladder and whatnot, and he starts to become afraid of his friend becoming like the villain, and that's ultimately because he's very an empathetic person and he would never want to see his friend like that. So that's ultimately what pushes him over the edge to take a stand.
Yeah.
How does the group's dynamic and relationship shift throughout the story?
In the beginning, they're all they all know each other and they've all been working with each other for a long time. So in the beginning, they're very in sync. But then as the story develops, it starts to become clear that Ryota has certain things that he wants to do, and Miles doesn't want to do that. But he can't formulate his thoughts. He can't object, so he keeps getting overruled. So then that sort of rift between the two grows as Miles is resentful of Ryota making decisions for him, and then Ryota keeps misunderstanding Miles' intentions. And then in the end, they're finally able to work together and repair everything. And actually, in the final scene, or the climax of everything, the resolution, they're able to actually sit down and explain everything to each other, and mend all the misunderstandings and understand each other better by the end.
Did they publish the film at the end when they got out of the film?
Mr. Greco, are we allowed to spoil it?
You're allowed to spoil the ending in the Q&A because it shows your audience is interested in this. Because who are you playing again, audience?
We're not playing anyone, we are executives.
You are. You are embodied.
You deserve the truth.
Yes. Executives in what's your media company? Graphic novel publishing house, right? So you're interested in the Act 3. So let's go ahead and talk about that.
So as a reward for kind of putting a stop to the war, essentially, by taking down first we have to explain Act 3. So basically, Miles and Rio are able to kind of detain Oren, and he confesses to being Bruce Herman, the man who actually killed Ivan Vanderbilt. So that kind of solves the war in essence, because each city blamed the other for his death, and now that they know Oren or Bruce was the true culprit, then they can more or less put a stop to the war. And with he's no longer manufacturing weapons, there's that massive decrease in war. So as a reward for taking down Oren and kind of solving the murder, they're rewarded with plentiful amounts of gold, which they take back to the real world, and they're finally financially free, and they can break ties with miserly media, who kind of gives them wild goose chase assignments that they don't want to do, and they're able to fund a full-scale fantasy film inspired by Emberfell, but they do not publish a documentary about Emberfell itself.
They actually destroy the portal.
Yeah, they actually destroy the portal, so no one can go back there and harm it. No human can go back there and harm it. So. Yeah.
Do you guys envision this being one long graphic novel or like multiple books?
I would say it's just one self-contained graphic novel. Yeah.
Could you imagine a sequel?
It's possible to imagine a sequel, life after discovering Emberfell, how that affects their, psyche and all that, knowing that there's this whole other fantasy world, and there's, could be other fantasy worlds that they have yet to explore, and their life after that whole ordeal. Yeah.
Would there ever be like a prequel, like how Oren came to power?
That'd be interesting. What do you guys think about that? That could be an interesting spin-off, kind of the life of Oren as he, of course, murders Ivan Vanderbilt and exploits the world of Emberfell for his own personal gain. Yeah.
Do we know why he murdered Ivan?
So Ivan was this nice, caring person who had a good relationship with the people of Emberfell and kind of protected it, and it was his private thing. And Bruce Herman was Ivan's friend, and he saw, hey, this is a really good opportunity for me to live like a king in this fantasy world, because I have kind of the human know-how, the 21st century skills, and he was able to exploit it. But he knew that with Ivan there, he wouldn't be able to do that, so he murdered Ivan. Yeah.
He sort of sees it as totally justified, just someone, he's allowed to step on people in his journey to success. Like, in his mind, it was totally something that he was allowed to do.
Yeah.
Do we know how the portals came to be, or if that just
basically, the way I imagined it is it's kind of been there since kind of the beginning of Earth, I guess. We never really explored that, but it's just like a permanent fixture. Natural. Yeah.
Did you develop the idea of having like a documentary group that was like a part of, what is it, Mindset Media? Or did you have the idea of like a portal to a fantasy world or like a different fantasy world?
I think we had the documentary group. That was one of the key fixtures throughout our entire journey. And I think we decided it would be fantasy later on.
We have time for one more question. I think Tyler, you had your hand up.
I was about to ask, does Emberfell have lore? Not like I want you to fully focus on that part if you were to make a graphic novel out of it, but is there any lore behind Emberfell?
So, funnily enough, Emberfell itself was not the main focus of our story development. Kind of the whole message and plot of the story is kind of realizing you have this opportunity to exploit something for your own personal gain, and actually sacrificing that opportunity for the greater good. So the story of Emberfell is not really about Emberfell, but it's about the characters. It's about the documentarians seeing what Bruce did, which is exploit the world for personal gain, and say, wait, I don't want to do that. I want to do what's right. I don't want to publish this documentary, even though it'll make me famous and rich and everybody will know my name. I'm not going to do that. So it's not so much about it.
It's like plot character driven.
Yeah.
In a way. Okay. Cool.
It sounds like your audience is interested in many facets of your vision. So, I mean, we heard prequel, we heard sequel, we heard, deepening the lore of Emberfell. So, I think you have an opportunity here to branch out even more with this project if you were to bring it to the next steps, next level. So, are you ready to make a deal? That's my question. Yeah? Are you open-minded to expanding it potentially? All right, right on. Anything for Mr. Flo?
I love the ethical questions being asked. It's always more intriguing rather than just good guy versus bad guy. It's like, ooh, what are they grappling with here? Love that. Thank you.
Right, and the documentary, right? That whole idea of documentary ethics combined with fantasy is a fabulous combination. I love that synthesis of those two genres that don't usually go together. All right, thank you very much.